All right, I'm back again with another gaming video. This time reviewing Clair Obscur Expedition 33, which is a RPG game that is quite popular at the moment. This is just a regular edition of the game on the PS5. So I just finished playing the game. I beat the final boss, and I just thought I'd turn on the recording and talk about the game a little bit, what my thoughts are. As usual, there is no script. This is just me spontaneously talking about the game for however long I feel like. I will hopefully remember to cover most of the important parts, because I don't even have any notes here in front of me. I'm just doing this completely off the cuff. Like I said, I just finished the game and turned on the record. So these are just, fresh off the top of my head thoughts on the game. As usual, some people will not like it, but no gameplay. I don't record gameplay. I don't edit gameplay into the videos. So you can just, put this in the background while you're cleaning, put this in the background while you are driving, put this in the background while you are doing whatever you are doing on this beautiful summer evening, or at least here where I live, it is a beautiful summer evening. Let's get into it. I guess that's enough of an intro. So this game was released earlier this year. I don't usually play brand new games. I often operate on a year, 2 year, 3 year delay going through my backlog. I quite rarely play new games. I did last year play Balatro, and I do occasionally play some other games when they are new. Elden Ring I did also play when it was new, but this one is now, for this year, the only 2025 game that I've played. And I wanted to play this game in part because I wanted to support the developers, so Sandfall Interactive. This is their first game. The game was 48 euros at launch, so that's around $50. Around $50, there isn't that much of a change in terms of the exchange rate. And I just want to support that, right? Releasing a brand new IP in 2025 for less than 50 euros, brand new. That's admirable. I really enjoy what they did here with that. These guys who made the game, they are former Ubisoft employees, the main people. It is kind of funny to think that Ubisoft could have had this game. Like, they released Assassin's Creed Shadows or whatever that is, haven't played it. It's probably a fine game, but it's not this game. Like, this is a really good one. Let's just start with that. It's a really, really good one. Ubisoft could have had this. This could be their new flagship IP, selling millions and millions and millions of copies, winning Game of the Year awards. I mean, this game is going to sweep the Game of the Year award season. Unless something drastic happens. Like, these guys are going to wipe the floor with other companies when it comes to the award season. Well, Ubisoft weren't apparently interested in bringing up some new IPs, new ideas, and just want to keep working on Assassin's Creed and Far Cry and all the other stuff that they do. So developers are walking out of the door and creating something much more interesting without the Ubisoft support. It's kind of funny, but it's also kind of sad, considering how Ubisoft used to be a really, really high quality, top of the line company. It's strange. Well, anyway, let's talk about Clair Obscur. I don't want to talk about Ubisoft because I don't really care about them. Clair Obscur It's an RPG. It is a turn-based RPG, but there is much more to the combat. I'll talk about that in a little bit. Has a kind of a fantasy setting as well. It's kind of interesting. It's very interesting, in fact. The game was mainly written by this one woman whose name I can't remember. She has a last name that's in part Swedish or Nordic. That's interesting. But yeah, she hasn't written anything that has been published before. And this is the first game that she wrote that has been published. It's a bit of a surprise because I think the writing is one of the most interesting and strongest aspects of the game. The music was composed by some guy that they found on SoundCloud, and he just happened to create one of the greatest video game soundtracks of the last at least 10 to 15 years. So that's something. So the people who made this game, they definitely know what they are doing. Like they can do a lot with very few resources. It is again kind of funny, considering how other companies have hundreds and hundreds, if not thousands, of employees, and they cannot produce like stuff that is to this quality level. The quality level in this game, from top to bottom, is exceptional. I'll talk about all of the different aspects next. The gameplay itself, the level design, the music, the visual design, everything. I'll try to cover it in as much detail as I can. This review is going to be a non-spoiler review for the most part, but I will give a warning close to the ending of the video when I start talking about the story in more detail, because I do want to cover some of the later story bits as well in this discussion video. Right. So in terms of score, I like to give a score out at the beginning of the video, because then the people who are only interested in hearing a number can just leave. So I would give Clair Obscur Expedition 33 a strong 9 out of 10. It's really good. There are some problems that I have with the game. I won't give it just a straight up 10 out of 10, but it's a really, really strong game. It is a great game. It is going to win Game of the Year awards. It is going to win other awards across the board. It's a fantastic game. So let's start by talking about the combat, because that is something that is quite heavily discussed. I haven't listened to or read any other reviews of this game, so if some of the things that I say here are repeated somewhere else, that's fine. I haven't really looked into it that much, so these are just my thoughts. The combat system, which is for the most part just turn-based RPG combat, is one of the most enjoyable turn-based combat systems that I've ever seen in a video game. Other ones that are somewhat in the same vein, maybe, like Grandia. I like Grandia a lot. The gameplay where you can freely run around the map and then hit the enemy, and there's these cooldowns and everything. Like, I really, really enjoy that system. But this one is so deep. It is so deep, and there's so much variety to the combat. So you have your typical JRPG style combat here, where you have these attacks and spells that you can choose from the use. You have attack points that you have to accumulate in order to be able to use some of the stronger ones in combat. So you have that, just this menu-based combat system. But then you also have a free shoot mode, where you can aim at the enemies and different body parts of the enemies, and you can shoot them. which is utilized in many of the fights in the game, where there are enemies that have, for example, weak points, or just they launch orbs into the air that you have to shoot down and things like this. So there is this sort of variety to it. There is also there's a dodge move, like an active dodge move that you have to press with the correct timing. You have the parry system that is very heavily involved in this combat system, where all of the attacks basically are parryable. And there's a lot of variety to that as well, because you have the regular parry, you have a gradient parry, which is just a different button. It's like a special attack parry. And then you have the jump button. You have to sometimes time jumps and jump over attacks, and that you can then counter attack off from. So there's a lot to do here. It's not just you sitting around pressing one button and watching your characters swing a sword. There is so much to the combat system that you are constantly coming up with new strategies. You have to learn the timings for the parries. You have to know how to use the free aim system. And then on top of that, you have the passive upgrades. You have this picto system where you have these slots that you can equip effects on. So you can, for example, put in an effect that if you shoot at an enemy in the free aim mode, there's a percentage chance that they catch fire, or that there is some sort of a critical hit buffer or whatever that comes up. And there are just hundreds of these different pictos that you can pick from. You collect them, you upgrade them, you level them up. You have to equip them on your characters, and after a certain number of fights that they are equipped in, you unlock them for all of the other characters to use. And they have these effects that stack on top of one another. And when you have a party of 3 characters, and you pick and choose the pictos for all the 3 characters, there are so many different combinations that you can have. There is so much variety and so much depth to the system, where you can just build a party that is specialized on stacking burn, stacking marks, so that's bonus damage from attacks, and then maybe I did a lot of those, and then also the defensive ones where you get shells if you're attacked. So you can basically shield your group from enemy attacks while just stacking fire and burn on top of the enemies. And you can do some crazy combos with these pictos. Like, there is so much synergy between the different options you can choose from. So if you are really into deep combat systems, you can spend just hours going through the list of possibilities that you can equip here and just put them. And of course, the weapons themselves also have different effects, different styles of weapons that you can use for your characters. It can get a bit overwhelming at times. So if you aren't really a hardcore RPG player, hardcore gamer, so to say, it can be a bit overwhelming at times. That is one of the negatives that I also have for the game. So it is a positive and a negative. It's a positive for people who are really into these in-depth combat systems, but it's a negative for people who aren't into that sort of thing. Of course, I think there are multiple difficulty levels that you can choose from, so you don't have to get too deep into the systems if you don't want to. You can just choose a easier difficulty level, but if you are really into this sort of stuff, you can go crazy with it. When you play the game, the combat system for the most part stays the same, but you are given like new enemy types every once in a while, and the different parry mechanics that I just talked about, so the gradient parry and the jumping and counterattacking, these sort of things, they are introduced a bit later in the game. So the game starts off quite basic and simple, and just keeps getting more and more and more and more complex, unlocking more and more stuff. So by the end of the game, you have so many options to yourself available. It's really nice. I really enjoy. I just enjoy how fast the combat is. If you are at the same level as the enemies, or maybe a bit over leveled, you can just free aim, spam all the enemies to death in one turn and move on. You don't really need a auto fighter or anything like a skip button. And I still thought that it was fun all the way to the end of the game, even though I was going through some of the side mission areas, for example, way too over leveled. I still wanted to fight the enemies and just spam them to death with the free aim. It was fun. There is so much visual flair to everything. The animations in the fighting, in the fights themselves, just the way that the characters move in combat and also out of combat. There's so much detail and so much variety to it. It's so great. It's just a joy to play and joy to look at us also. In terms of the structure of the game, I want to talk about that a little bit more later on, because I don't want to go to the spoiler parts yet. But I will just say that the opening of the game is exceptionally strong. I really, really like the opening of the game, where you are in this town where all of this weird stuff is going on. Nothing is explained to you. There's barely any exposition, which is great. So it is a complete mystery. What is even happening around you? What is the gommage? What are these characters? What are the expeditions? Like, why are you going to this weird place? What are you even fighting against? None of this is explained up front. It is revealed to you as you play the game, but it has this sense of mystery to it that was quite exciting. And also the music in the opening section, it is so good. It reminded me a lot of Silent Hill 2 and the song Letters that plays at the beginning of the game at the parking lot. The song that plays here at the start of Clair Obscur, before the game really like starts in full force, it is so sad and somber. It has this overwhelming sadness to it. The song it sets the mood for the rest of the game perfectly. And then later on in the game, they bring that song back at a perfect moment, and it is such a good track. I absolutely adore the soundtrack of this game. So as I said, the soundtrack is made by some guy they found on SoundCloud. I don't even know his name. How they got this performance out of this random guy, I don't know. But I guess the developers, like the producers and the main people behind the studio, I guess they saw something there, and they were right. Like, they have a really, really good eye for talent, obviously. The soundtrack is so good. It is so incredibly good. There is piano tracks, there's acoustic guitar, there are these, there's lots of like choir music, like choral singing, lots of female vocals, some really dark ambient electronic music as well in certain sections that I absolutely loved. And it is so good. It is difficult to put into words how good it is at some points. There is also some quite humorous music there. There is this French flair to it at times. So you have some of these tracks that sound like French folk music as well, which is quite interesting. So much variety. Like everything about this game, it's just quality. It is so good. I cannot overstate that enough. It is so good. And then after the opening section of the game, you get into the actual RPG gameplay where you have this weird new island area that you go to that you don't even know what really is there, really. So it is a kind of a shock when you get there, and the cinematics are incredible to look at throughout the game, but especially when you first get to the island on the beach. Everything that happens there, it is. There are many moments in a game that are just jaw-dropping, that are completely out of the left field. You aren't expecting them, and they just hit you, and it's fantastic. Like it is rare for a game to have this sort of an effect on me, where I'm playing a game and I'm constantly surprised by it. I'm surprised by the characters. I'm surprised by the plot twists. I'm surprised by just everything there is to it. And I'm just sitting there enjoying every single second of it. It is quite rare. Then you get to the actual island area, whatever, and there is this. You have your overworld, like in a JRPG. You walk around this overworld, and then you go into these smaller gameplay sections inside the overworld, these dungeons and whatever. So it's very typical JRPG stuff from that sense. The game does open up a lot. It is much bigger than I was expecting. I heard before I started playing the game that it's around 20 to 30 hours long, and that's how long it took me to finish it. It took me a little bit over 30 hours to go through the final boss, and I still have a bunch of side content to do, which I will go back to after I finish recording this. So I will just continue playing it until I do everything. I would also, at this point, I would suggest not doing all the side content before going to the final boss, because it is very easy to over-level yourself and completely ruin some of the main story boss fights. I did this mistake early on in the game, where I did a bunch of side quests and exploring before I continued on with the main story, and I just breezed through the main story, the area and the boss fight, and I just thought after that, okay, I'm not going to explore as much anymore. I'm just going to continue with the main storyline, see what there is, and then later on, after finishing the game, you can go back and do all of the stuff that you missed. So I would suggest doing that. Just skip most of the side content and just keep going forward with the main storyline and go back to the side content later. I got to the final boss fight at around level 58 to 59. I think that was perfect for it. It was a bit of a challenge, but not too much. I also did it without using the picto that allowed you to do more than 10,000 damage. So if I had that on, the boss fight would have been way too easy, the final boss fight, at just the normal difficulty level, also I should add. So yeah, don't grind to level 99 before going to the final boss, because you're just going to ruin the experience for yourself. Right. In terms of the gameplay areas themselves, this is one part where the budget of the game and it being a smaller studio shows. So after all of that glowing just hype about the game, how incredible it is, I still only gave it a 9 out of 10. And one of the reasons is that the level design is very simplistic. It is nothing special, really. The areas are short, they are quite small. There's also this annoying bit to it. The game is visually incredibly nice to look at. I don't want to take anything away from that. But when you are playing the levels, it is often impossible to know where you can and cannot go on the map. So you are in, for example, some ruined city, and you see just a massive area that you potentially could go into, but there's this tiny fence and you cannot jump over the fence. So you cannot enter the other area. And the game is just full of these areas that have these incredible detailed vistas and so much detail to the visual design and the backgrounds and everything. But then you cannot go there because there's an invisible wall. There are invisible walls everywhere. And it is often difficult to know where they are and where you can platform to, because there are also hidden areas and secrets and everything that you can platform to, you can jump to. But it is almost impossible for the most part to know where you can actually go. So I spent just dozens of hours running around in the maps, jumping around, trying to go behind items that I couldn't just figure out later I couldn't go behind, and trying to find secrets and everything like that. So I wished it was more, or it was better explained to the player where they can and cannot go. And this is one of the big problems with the game. There is no minimap when you are inside the levels. There is a minimap when you are in the overworld, so you know exactly where you are in the world and where all the dungeons are and whatnot. But in the levels themselves, there is no minimap, so you have no idea where the borders of the map are. That is quite annoying and frustrating at times. The visual design of the game is one of the strong points, like I said. It takes a lot of inspiration from software games, quite obviously. Whenever you enter a new area, the title of the area is there in the middle of the screen, and there is this sound effect that plays almost like a primordial screech. It sounds like Bloodborne. It like that effect sounds like Bloodborne. And if you look at the ruined cities and everything, it reminded me a lot of Dark Souls 3, and in particular the DLC, the Ringed City, with the city that is kind of falling into the ocean and in ruin and so on. It is very nice to look at, especially for someone who is really into From Software games. So I was right at home there. Other, I would assume, influences. I don't know if this is true or not, but I would assume that the developers, they are quite fond of Berserk, the manga and the anime. Some parts of this game reminded me of the Eclipse from Berserk, which is quite nice. Of course, From Software games are also inspired by Berserk, so there's this overlap there in terms of the influences. But yeah, Berserk is there. There is one section in a game that is quite, I would assume, heavily inspired by Journey, the PS3 game, in a desert. I will talk about that area in just a little bit in more detail. Also, other influences: Final Fantasy 15, Final Fantasy 16 character designs. I haven't played those games, but I am familiar with the designs, and many of the characters they look like they could be in modern Final Fantasy games, which is quite nice. What else do we have in terms of influences? I guess those are the main ones, like From Software, Bloodborne in particular, Dark Souls, Berserk, Journey. There were other ones that I was thinking of at the time of playing, but I haven't. Oh yeah, one more that I should mention is Bastion, the Supergiant games. In Bastion, when you start the game, there has been this calamity, and the world is in ruins, and all of the characters that were caught in a calamity have turned into these statues of ash. And in this game, all the characters that get caught in the gommage, or however it's pronounced, this sort of calamity, they are turned into flower petals that then are swept away in the wind. That reminded me a lot of Bastion and how the ash statues that fall apart, and stuff like that. It's quite interesting. I don't know, that could be a bit of a reach, but that's just what it reminded me of. So there is just so much to this game that is fantastic. Now, another negative. Just I don't want to be overwhelmingly positive and then give a 9 out of 10, because that wouldn't make any sense. I thought that in the middle parts of the story, it started to drag a bit, because before you are allowed to go into the final place, when you go through the game, you start from the bottom of the map and you go north, right? So when you get to the northernmost part of the map, I don't want to spoil anything about it, you aren't allowed to enter it until you go into these 2 other dungeons, and you have to find an item, and then with those items you can enter the actual final part. So that's very typical RPG padding, JRPG padding. You are supposed to go to an important place, but you cannot go there before you go to these 2 other places and do this side stuff, right? So that I thought that was maybe a bit of a drag. However, the areas that you do go to in that section, those are some of the best areas in the whole game. So it's not much of a negative that the developers force you to enter areas that are some of the strongest areas in the game. And here I want to talk especially more about the desert section, which is the part that I said earlier reminded me a lot of Journey, with this beautiful desert area and all of these banners floating around in the air, and this sort of thing, with the dancer boss fight. It is such a good looking area. Some of the strongest visual design I've seen in a long time. Great soundtrack to go with it. The boss fight I thought was really fun as well. Had this, I don't want to spoil anything about it, but it has this mechanic to it that I thought was really, really fun, and that stood out from many of the other boss fights. There are so many boss fights in the game, just in addition to this one, that are really fun. Also some bad ones. I don't like the boss fights where you have to just dodge and dodge and dodge, or parry and parry and parry all over the place. That felt a bit cheap, but many of the boss fights are really, really fun. Especially the main boss fights, the ones that are important to the story. They are so visually compelling, and they have all of these mechanics to them that are quite surprising and interesting as well. And the animations are so good. Yeah. Right. So I guess at this point, how long is this so far? 33 minutes. I guess those are some of the basic thoughts I have about the game before I go to the spoiler section. The game is really, really good. And some of the criticisms that I have, like the ones that I've mentioned so far, are quite minor. So the combat system being a bit convoluted at times, the level design being quite too simplistic most of the time, the areas being quite short, and so on. The biggest issues I have with the game are in the later story bits that I will talk about next. So this is something that I wanted to save last for the video. So this is the spoiler section. If you don't want spoilers about the story of Clair Obscur, then close your ears. I will show like a thumb on screen after I finish talking about the spoilers. if you want to go to the end of the video and hear what I have to say there when I get to the end. But yeah, in terms of the story, I was really intrigued by it early on. The expeditions and this painter lady and everything, it was interesting and kind of different from what you usually see in a fantasy setting RPG game. So there were some fresh ideas there. Immediately when I saw that there's a painter, I was reminded, oh yeah, so this is like Dark Souls with the painted worlds, right? So there's this person who is painting a world and you are inside the painting, and that's not real, right? So I was immediately thinking of that, and it ended up being true because it is revealed later on in the game that the whole the whole premise of the game and so on is not the actual game world even. That's interesting, but I'll get to that in a second. So I was quite intrigued by it. I thought that the early sections exploring the island, I keep calling it an island, but it's more of it is some sort of an island, I guess. It's good enough. I don't want to spend my time racking my brain on what the proper term for it is. But yeah, the early parts, like when you're in the south portions of the map, were quite interesting. You didn't know really anything about the game world or what is going on. And learning about it, the more I learned about it, the less I became interested in it, unfortunately, because the game turns from this let's go on an adventure and try to fight against this overwhelming force, the paintress and the Nevrons, and let's try to figure out how we can beat this person. It turns into a family drama story that I didn't think was nearly as interesting as the original premise, with the mystery and the expedition and everything. So it is revealed that there's this character Verso who comes. I skipped Gustav. Maybe I'll talk about Gustav for a bit. I thought Gustav was a funny character. It's one of those shocking moments in recent video game history where Gustav gets killed out of the blue. It reminded me a lot of Final Fantasy VII. I didn't want to mention Final Fantasy VII in particular when I was talking about the influences, but yeah, that's obviously influenced by Aerith and Sephiroth. So Gustav gets killed off and replaced by Verso, who is basically the same character with the same, like even the level that you grinded Gustav to is transferred to this new character, and everything is transferred over to the new character. So it's basically you're just replacing Gustav with Verso because of story reasons, basically. And it is revealed that Verso is the son of this, like one of the main antagonists, Renoir, and there's the sister Alicia, and then the mother, and it turns into this family drama. And then this family drama is brought to a new level when it is revealed that you aren't even actually real. Like you are inside a painting that is being painted in the real world. And you aren't really told much about the real world. I guess they are going to make a sequel that is going to take place more in the real world, where there is some sort of a war between painters and authors or whatever. I guess that can be interesting, but we don't really know anything about it. Well, some things, but not much. But yeah, the last parts of the story, I like. The story has an act form, so there's Act 1, Act 2, and so on. Act 2 is where the original story gets fragmented into this other stuff, right? So after Act 2, you have an epilogue. And then after the epilogue, you have Act 3. That's a bit of a strange structure, really. So you're shown the epilogue there in the middle of the game with the Mael Alicia, like the real world character who was like whose face got destroyed in this fire and whose brother died in the fire and so on. And then you go back inside the painting to finish off the game. That's an interesting structure and a pretty bold structure to implement. And I don't know how well it works, really. I guess it does work. It's something interesting. It's something different. So I guess that's a positive in many ways. But yeah, then Act 3 is just it's the family drama. It's not as interesting as the original premise. That's my problem with it. Like Renoir and the wife and Verso and Mael / Amelie, and there's also a second sister who's not inside the painting. Also, someone who's, I can't remember her name. The name started with the C. And anyway, and I just started losing interest in the storyline at this point. Unfortunately, I was hoping to have more of the expedition stuff in the game, but before it turns into a full-blown family drama with these father and son and sister relationships there, and all of the characters that you thought were the main characters, like Gustav and then Luna and these characters, like they aren't even, like they are insignificant, basically. Like they didn't even matter for the most part, because they aren't real. They are just painted. They're fictional characters inside this painting. So I wish they left the reveal about the real world and this trickery with the epilogue structure, like the epilogue being there in the middle of the game. I wish they left that for the last part and revealed that at the end, and maybe cut down a little bit on the family drama. Maybe keep some of that for DLC or for a sequel. I think the game would have been more. The game would have been stronger as a whole. I'm sure many people disagree with me on this, but it was a bit of a letdown at the end. I wasn't that interested in the characters. Renoir especially, I wasn't too interested in. Also, I found it really weird how much they made it a big deal that Verso is the son of the painter, basically, like the woman, the main, like Renoir's wife. How much of a big deal they made out of that, because I thought it was incredibly obvious. There is this section when you get to the monoliths where you go up the monoliths and you have these flashbacks, kind of, or these scenes from the past that are shown to you, where the shadow people are like painting and playing piano and whatever. And I think it was one of the first ones where you have this woman who is clearly like Renoir's wife. I can't remember the name of the character. Renoir's wife, and then there's the small boy next to him playing the piano, right? And that is the point where you should know that Verso is the son of this painter woman, right? Like that is the last. At that point, it should be obvious. No question about it. Like this character is clearly related to that lady, who is the wife of Renoir. Right? It has been. I guess if you skip the campfire bit where Verso talks about playing the piano, and you skip some of the exploration parts, like unlocking areas of this manor that you unlock rooms in, where some of these audio logs can be found, where Renoir is talking about his past and so on. I guess if you skip all of those, you wouldn't know that Verso has this connection to this woman. But they keep milking it for some reason. The voice actors are in the dialogue. They are constantly talking about, what does this mean? Who are these people? I don't know. Where it should be obvious, like they should know it. Everyone should know it at that point. And then even in one of the cutscenes later on, it is explicitly said by one of the characters. I guess it's Mael or someone, I can't remember. One of the characters just straight out says it. Oh, so Verso is this and that and blah blah blah. This info dump, this worthless info dump. Like, please, just more subtle writing. I would appreciate more subtle writing. It was weird. It was weird knowing something and knowing that it's obvious, and having these characters act like morons, not understanding anything that's around them. It's strange, right? But yeah, that's my thoughts on the story. I guess I'll end the spoiler section there. So to finish off, final thoughts on the game. One part that I forgot to talk about is the voice acting. I'll add that here to the end. I think the voice acting is, for the most part, pretty good. One negative is that some of the voice acting is quite over the top, especially Monoko, and that is the character Monoko. It is a purposefully over the top character for sure. Yeah, but still, the voice actor is kind of cringy for Monoko. This extremely over the top. I am an American voice actor and I always talk like this. Every time I end a sentence, it has to sound like this. There's just this over articulation and this overly gravelly, overly articulated voice that many American voice actors like to do is just something that I personally do not enjoy at all. But for the most part, I thought the voice actors were really good, especially the female characters. The voice actors were all great. Mayal in particular, really good voice actor. So yeah, to end up, the game is incredibly good. One reason why I cannot give it a 10 out of 10 is also because this is not really my genre of game. I often, when I play RPGs, especially JRPGs, I am underwhelmed by them. And I don't see what the greatness is about them necessarily. I had this problem with Tales of Symphonia. I just don't really care about that game at all. That's a controversial opinion that a lot of people are not going to like, but I just couldn't get into that game. Also, like some of the other JRPGs I've played. What is there? What have I even played? I'm trying to look around on my shelf. What JRPGs have I even played? I haven't played that many. But the other RPG games like Elder Scrolls, I've never been a huge fan of Elder Scrolls. I thought Oblivion was kind of funny and goofy, but really that's about it. And just in general, RPGs aren't really my genre. I just cannot get into them that well. Oh yeah, another one that I've played is Dragon Age, the original Dragon Age Origins. A lot of people love that game. I thought it was fine. I gave it like an 8 out of 10 back in the PS3 era. It was fine, but I wasn't blown away by it. So me giving a 9 out of 10 to a RPG game means that most people who are really into this genre probably would enjoy it more than I do. I can see why people give this game 10 out of 10s too. But yeah, some of the negatives that I, again, to reiterate, the combat system is maybe a bit too convoluted at times. The level design is a bit simple, and there's no minimap, so it's kind of difficult to navigate at times. Also, I think the parry system is maybe a bit overblown. There's such a strong emphasis on parrying in many of the boss fights that it was kind of obnoxious. You had to learn all the parry timings or just get insta-killed by the bosses. It was annoying at times. And also some of the story parts that I talked about in the spoiler section, I was much more into the story at the beginning than I was at the end of the game. Let's just leave it at that. So, but still, it's a really strong game. It is one of the better games I've played this year, one of the better games I've played in the PS3 era, and I think it's going to go down in history as one of these this console generation's gems, like one of the best games of this generation. I would be surprised if it doesn't hold up to the test of time. It is that good, and it was created by a team of around 30 people, and some of the people involved aren't really even professional, like video game industry professionals. This is where they began their careers. That's really impressive. It's an impressive game from top to bottom, although it does at times show the limitations of the budget and the limitations of what a small team can do. It is so good. It is so good. So that's it for my review. A 9 out of 10. I would give it a strong 9 out of 10. So yeah, I'll be back again next week with something else. Hopefully you got something out of this rambling review of Clair Obscur Expedition 33. Yeah, I'll see you again next week. Bye.